Hello there. Today I'm very interested to be looking at a wine from Chateau Petit Val. The wine is called Muse du Val. It's a 2022 Saint Emilion Grand Cru, and having already tried Chateau Petit Val's 2022, this is a premium cuvee that they make from an individual 1 hectare block, and so I'm interested to see how this builds on the quality that I saw in the Chateau Petit Val itself. So Petit Val, an estate about 2 kilometres to the east of Cheval Blanc and La Doinique in Saint Emilion. This is a premium plot of 35-year-old vines. It's on a hillside. The soils here are a clay limestone. Now Chateau Petit Val was purchased in 2014 by Jean-Louis and Olivia Alloin. What they bought was a 6.5 hectare estate. Jean-Louis and Olivia are originally from Lyon, and Jean-Louis, a wine-loving entrepreneur, bought the estate and has invested very heavily in it, and they have great ambitions for the property. And I think ideally they're aiming for this to become a Grand Cru Class A. Jean-Louis' family background actually includes a father and a grandfather who were farmers in the Beaujolais region. Part of how they've improved the estate, they've increased its size to 12 hectares, and that's included some land with different terroirs. One of the important moves in improving the quality of the wines here was taking on somebody called David Liorit as the operations manager. He'd previously worked with the well-known Bordeaux consultant Stéphane Derenoncourt. And plenty of work's been done here, both in the vineyards and in the winery. In the vineyards, for instance, vinification is now done entirely sustainably. Not only that, but they've also embraced biodiversity, so fruit trees are being planted. There are beehives here now. As part of their approach to sustainability, they've got grass growing between every second row, and the alternate rows will be ploughed, and that way the grass is ploughed back into the ground every second year. They've also on some occasions been growing cereals between the vine rows, again I assume to plough back into the soil to return nutrients to it. I think the ploughing means that there's no use of herbicides here to prevent weeds under the vines, and a lot of the work in the vineyards is being done with a horse, and what that means is that you're not driving a heavy tractor between the vines, and thus there's less damage, compaction being done to the soil that way. And I guess also there's probably now a ready supply of fertiliser. The different plots in the vineyard have been replanted to make sure that the right varieties are on the right soils, and they've done this using techniques such as massal selection, where you go into the vineyard, you pick out the best performing vines and you propagate from those, so that you're continually improving the vine stock that already exists in your vineyard. There's been some experimentation as well. They've got some Malbec planted. They've even got some Riesling. Now, neither of those varieties goes into this wine, but clearly they're wanting to try as many different things as possible. As far as the approach to quality is concerned within the harvest, they've adopted much more in terms of yield restriction. So you'll find bunch removal, green harvesting, leaf plucking, and other techniques such as that going on in the vineyard to improve fruit ripeness. At harvest, everything's picked by hand. This is all going onto shallow trays, so the fruit isn't crushed on its way to the winery. The fruit is sorted a number of times, both in the vineyard and the winery, and using various different techniques. For instance, in the winery, they're using a vibrating sorting table to ensure that only grapes of a certain size are in the ferment. Small berries can fall through the slots in the vibrating table and can be dispensed with. They're also using a technique called densibé, which, if I'm understanding it correctly, is actually putting the fruit into water and allowing the riper grapes to select themselves that way through the density. At the winery, the fruit has all been chilled down using a cold store, a cold room. The fruit is processed plot by plot, and once the fruit's been destemmed and crushed, there's a pre-fermentation cold soak. So that's the skins of the grapes being allowed to soak in the juice, so that there's an extraction of perfumes and colour prior to the presence of the alcohol that would be produced during the fermentation. So these are extracted before there's the harsh stripping effect of alcohol in the vats. Fermentation for the Muse du Val, on the estate's main wine, which ferments in temperature controlled stainless steel. This is fermented in open topped 400 litre French oak casks, and thus the extraction is managed not by pumping over, but by actually pushing down the cap of skins. Probably more of a technique that you might expect to see in Burgundy, and a way of managing quite soft extraction. After the end of fermentation, the skins are allowed to steep in the wine for a further 8 to 10 days. And then all the wine goes into new French oak, so 100% new French oak, presumably barriques, 225 litre barrels, where it undergoes its malolactic conversion in the barrel. Malolactic conversion softens the wine's acidity, but doing it in the barrel helps to marry the fruit and the oak components in the wine, and will give smooth, rich, chocolatey notes, coffee touches, and many people believe it makes the wine more approachable when young. The wine ages in total for 16 to 18 months in oak. Now, I'm not told whether that is all 100% new French oak. It might be reasonable to assume it would be. And the wine is only blended at the end of the maturation period before it goes into bottle. Part of the improvements in the vineyard that I probably should have mentioned earlier is an increase in the proportion of Cabernet Franc. They believe that that produces elegance. This is a wine that's 50% Merlot and 50% Cabernet Franc, so I'm really interested to see how that's going to taste. In terms of production, they make just over 400 cases of this, so it's not a widely available wine. It only comes off 1 hectare of vineyard. For that reason, as well as for all the quality and attention that's gone into the winemaking, I'm expecting that the price will be that bit higher than the ordinary Petit Val. But let's have a look at it and see what we make of it, shall we? First thing to say is this is incredibly deep, dark and dense. Looking at the colour, it's a dark, almost black ruby. There's a hint of purple at the rim, but it's almost losing no colour up to the rim whatsoever. It is completely opaque. As I swirl it, it almost seems to be staining the glass. The label here doesn't actually give me an alcohol percentage, possibly because I've been sent this as a sample, and maybe that's a detail that's yet to be printed on the label prior to knowing which market it's going to. I would imagine, given that this is a 2022 nice ripe vintage, this is from Saint Emilion, quite a modern style, and also the fact there's a fair amount of Merlot in the blend, this is probably likely to be about 14% alcohol, maybe 14.5. Certainly when I swirl it, it's forming tears very readily on the side of the glass there. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? The aromas are a rich, opulent fruit. They go quite quickly from a fairly fresh red fruit into a darker red to black fruit, almost sort of rich, ripe, very high ripeness red cherry through to black cherry. There's an intensity, almost a black plum, the sort of dams and the bullace, that sort of deeper, smooth, rich black fruit. So that's the taste. I should have mentioned on the nose some really quite apparent but very well knit notes of oak, of sweet spice, of cedar, of vanilla, very well integrated into the fruit. On the front palate, those are much more apparent. There really is a clean cedar note with vanilla backed up by a chocolatiness, which is helping to blend it in with this sort of rich, opulent, dark, high ripeness fruit. It's ripe, dark, rounded fruit with almost sort of touches of currant or sultana, high ripeness notes at the back there. And yet there is some quite good freshness. You're seeing all this rich, ripe fruit first, but then the freshness is cutting in and you end up seeing a fairly juicy, dark fruit finish. Having said that, this is a fairly well structured wine. This is medium to full bodied. These are fine, grainy tannins, and you're seeing that sort of cedariness. And that's across the back palate there. It's not smothering the fruit, but it is rather to the fore. The alcohol on the other hand, while there is sort of richness and roundness which must be coming from that, the wine doesn't finish hot. If anything, there's this sort of slightly drying, cedary note coming through. It's not astringent. It is allowing this sort of juicy, dark fruit to linger, but there is a drying note that probably is foreshortening the finish just a little at this stage. This is a very opulent wine. The oak is fairly obvious, but has been very well handled. I mean, the structure of those tannins is beautiful. The integration with the fruit, powerful tannins. I'd probably leave this for at least 4 or 5 years before coming back to it, and it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to leave it for a bit longer. Certainly it's a wine that I think would last for 15 to 20 years. I did have a look at our Wine Searcher aggregated critic score for this, and it comes in at 93 out of 100, and I think that's a very well earned 93. I might almost suggest that it has the potential to exceed that score as it opens up, as it ages. It's been a really interesting and very enjoyable wine, and if you get the chance to try it, I would heartily recommend that. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. If you have any comments you'd like to leave, we'd be delighted if you'd pop those in the comments box below. We would love to hear your views on the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. I will leave a link in the notes below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, so that you can find out where it's available, what its pricing is, and you can use the tabs on that page to find out a lot more about the background, things like the regions, the grape varieties, the producer, some of the production notes, its price history, critics' notes, other users' reviews. All that is there, with the hope of giving you the option to find out all the background information you might need if you want to purchase it. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the video, it'd be fantastic if you'd consider passing it on to them. We'd really appreciate your endorsement in that way. Now, this is the last of this particular batch of 2022 vintage Bordeaux that I've had the chance to look at. I think they're showing that, certainly from the right bank, this is a really attractive, approachable vintage. I think there's plenty of good value for money around. I certainly think it's going to be a vintage that we're going to enjoy drinking over the next few years. So thank you to Bee Bordeaux for sending me the samples, and thank you so much for joining us to watch the videos. Do please come and join us for another tasting in the next few days. Bye for now.